So for the first part of learning about fundamentals, we're going to go over what is behavior. So we're going to jump around a little bit with the sections, and we're actually going to talk about task A6, which is describe behavior in the environment in observable and measurable terms. So what is behavior? According to Cooper, Heron, and Heward, behavior is the activity of living organisms. Human behavior includes everything that people do. It's defined as that portion of an organism's interaction with its environment that is characterized by detectable displacement in space through time of some part of the organism, and the results in measurable change in at least one aspect of the environment. So that means it's anything a person says or does, and the behavior is a person's action or set of actions, okay? And behavior can be observed, described, and recorded. So how do we know if something is a behavior? A behavior is anything that we can see or sense and record it and write it down. So if I see something happening, I can write it down and know that it's behavior. So for an example, jumping is a behavior I could see and say that the person jumped in the air. So if I looked at a person and saw that they were jumping, I could say that they had a behavior of jumping. Another example is typing is a behavior. I could see that the person's moving their fingers on the keyboard. I could also record down what they have typed, how long they have typed, or how they have typed. So that could be considered a behavior. Behavior happens all the time. Behavior is an activity of a living organism. Human behavior involves anything and everything a person does. So if behavior is happening all the time, if a person's saying that a person's having behaviors, they're just contradicting themselves because behavior is happening all the time, no matter what it is. We could also say that inanimate objects cannot behave. So a rock doesn't have falling behavior. This is the same as a human doesn't have falling behavior because they're not acting on themselves to have behavior. What are the defining characteristics of behavior? So behavior involves movement of a living object. Behavior is also observable. We're able to see it happen, right? Behavior is measurable. We're able to record data on it when we see behavior happening. Okay? Behavior is an action, not a state of being. So we don't confuse being angry, which is a state of being, with property destruction, which is a behavior. So if we see somebody throwing a chair, we can see that happening and we're able to record that as one behavior, okay? So the state of being angry is not a behavior. However, in this picture to the left, we could say that he's opening his mouth and possibly shaking his fists if we see him moving, all right? Those two things are behaviors. Being angry is a state and it's not a behavior. In ABA, we use the behavior test. So if we want to test if something is a behavior, we do something called the dead man's test. What we look at is to see if a dead person can do something. If they could do it, then it's not a behavior. The same goes for any object, inanimate object like a rock or a stick, things like that, okay? So let's see if somebody failed the test. The man is lying on the ground. Can a dead person do that? I think they can, right? So lying on the ground is not a behavior, all right? So some people like to say that someone's having non-compliant behavior when someone is lying on the ground or not listening. In actuality, they're having an absence of behavior. If we want it to be a behavior, we need to define it as a measurable behavior. Okay, so in a non-compliance behavior, we can label it as somebody walking away from somebody when they're being told a direction. We can measure that and record it. Therefore, it is behavior. So here are some examples and non-examples of behavior. So for examples, we have Tom asked for a cookie. Steve moved to the restroom. So that's him moving and walking. If he did, that's observable. Brian punts Kevin. we could see that he hit Kevin. We could record it as one aggression. Chris ate a cake. We could see him eating. And Nick gave someone $1. We could see him giving somebody $1 if that happened. So for non-examples, Tom felt like eating a cookie. We can't see anything there. We could say that he felt like something, but we can't observe it. Steve needed to go to the restroom. An outside observer wouldn't know if he needed to go to the bathroom or not. Brian was angry at Kevin. Okay, we could say he's angry, but he's not having any behavior. Chris lacked willpower. Okay, well, we said that he ate the cake, which is a behavior, but if we're also saying that he lacked willpower in that situation, that's not a behavior. Nick was being friendly. Same goes here. If he gave somebody $1, that's a behavior, but him being friendly is a state of being. Behavior is observable. The person doing the actions or those watching can observe the behavior using their senses directly or indirectly. If we're observing that directly, it involves the person of the observer seeing, hearing, smelling, or feeling it occur. Okay, for an example, it says, I heard Billy talking down the hallway. That's a direct measurement. You could hear Billy talking down the hallway. Indirect observation involves using special tools to observe behavior. So for example, a doctor uses a stethoscope to check a person's heartbeat. If two people are observing, they must both agree that is a behavior if they're both observing. So now that we know what a behavior is, we're going to talk about what is a response. So a response is defined as an action of an organism's self-effector. An effector is an organ at the end of an efferent nerve fiber that is specialized for altering its environment mechanically, chemically, or in terms of other energy changes. So that fancy definition just means a behavior is in response to a stimulus. Okay, so for example, if a person is asking me a question and that's the stimulus, my response would be to answer them back. So with responses, there are response classes. And response classes are a group of responses that serve the same function. So that is the way that a person may have different behaviors to achieve the same goal. So example, if a person is asking me a question and that's the stimulus, my responses can be talking back to them to answer the question. I could write out the answer on a piece of paper and hand it to them, or I could point to something that resembles the answer. So those all serve the same function, but there are different responses. Repertoires are a term used by behavior analysts to describe all the behaviors that a person can do. Behaviors that have been learned that are relevant to particular settings or tasks. So for example, each of us has a repertoire of behaviors for social situations, which could be different languages, different routines, different kinds of recreation that we do, or just how we greet each other. So it's important to know some of the person's repertoire when implementing programs. So for example, if we have a kindergartner that doesn't know how to write on a piece of paper, we wouldn't expect them to write out the alphabet if we're trying to teach them something new.